What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another one. This series where I, Abdullah Khalid, am taking you through my research journey, starting with my research question and ending up with our presentation and final paper. Today is a bit of a special episode. It's kind of a recap of the past few semester, basically, of AP Research. So, the first thing I want to talk about is my first few weeks in AP Research, what I felt like. So, whenever I was starting AP Research, I was a little bit kind of confused about, I understood that we needed to make a research paper and we needed to do a presentation on it because I had upperclassmen who I talked to and that's what they said. But me personally, I was a little bit confused as to what the process would look like. Like, would we go in straight into doing our research paper, or what would be the steps up to a research paper? But Ms. Moncrief, my teacher, guided me through a lot of that process. And through her, we've been going from the basics, kind of starting with what we learned in AP Seminar, which is gathering sources and kind of synthesizing that data. And now we have expanded and we've gone on to writing lit reviews, and we're working on our original research now. Talking about that process, how I ended up picking my research topic was I knew, even though I didn't understand how to write the paper, I already knew from the moment I chose the course what I wanted to do. I wanted to research refugee language development, or more broadly, how refugees learn and how children who are not refugees learn and how they compare. Because I have direct experience with refugees and I know their struggles and I know their issues and I know the gaps that they face. And so because of that, I really wanted to focus on how to improve that and ameliorate that situation, especially in the kind of communities that I worked in, because these refugees, they don't get the same opportunities that we get, or at least in my community, the same opportunities that kids in my community get. And so I want to kind of help broaden people's perspective on that kind of social standing and the general understanding of refugees and what they have in terms of education, and how we can improve that, and how we can direct our attention towards their needs and lower the ceiling raise the floor, rather than raise the ceiling. Why I chose my topic, I mentioned that, and then my most current research question is, what is the academic achievement gap between refugees and native-born students, and how does scheduled tutoring impact the discovered gaps? Because from my research, I learned that there are achievement gaps, so how test scores and general studies and refugees, how those numbers compare to the numbers of native-born students. And so that was something that I was looking at, and something that's my current research question, and so that's why it's kind of structured like that. And the scheduled tutoring is because I work with Gideon, I work with Ma'ruf, I work with two different organizations who have the same goal of tutoring students, but their demographics are vastly different. And so that's essentially what I'm comparing, how the scheduled tutoring have helped refugees and how they've helped these native-born students, and how fast have they learned using the scheduled tutoring. Something that I found most interesting about my foundational research was the amount of research that is done in other countries, yet the surprising lack of it in the United States. A lot of other countries, I was looking a lot at Germany, Ireland had a lot of stuff too, and again, that might be part of my source mining, which I talked about in another episode, but it also highlights the difference between European education, like the thought of Europeans in terms of refugee education, in the US, because the US releases they have a whole website where they aim to help refugees, but currently there's not a lot being done to help those refugees whenever they come into the United States, and oftentimes they're put into these apartments where they're not in great school districts, and the school districts don't get sufficient funding, and so they're unable to help the refugees. And so that idea that I found in my research, that European countries are really ahead of us, the United States, in this area, is really fascinating to me, because America is one of the places where most refugees dream of coming. And so if we are not doing what we need to do in order to help them best, I want to be able to help the U.S. and help the education department and help teachers in their attempts to teach and educate refugee students who come to America. Um, the gap, as I was talking about earlier, the gap that I want to target is how does scheduled tutoring help with these gaps? Because a lot of time there's a lot of there's a lot of research on scheduled tutoring and like not necessarily the academic benefits, but more so the psychological benefits of scheduled tutoring, because you get that the refugees who often come here with no friends, they have limited English abilities, they make a connection with the tutor. And so more than just academic achievement, it also helps them feel more comfortable and come out of their shell, because they are likely traumatized from their experiences in their home country. And so tutoring helps them gain an outlet for this, for their thoughts and for their experiences. And so although I understand and I appreciate those efforts, there's not much being done into how much scheduled tutoring helps these refugee students, and specifically how the numbers compare. So how does refugees who don't take, or native born students who are taking scheduled tutoring, how they compare with refugee students who take tutoring? How is scheduled tutoring helping the refugees catch up to the native born students, and how much are they growing compared to the growth rate of native born students? My method, in order to compare this, I'm using a positive control group, as I mentioned earlier, and I've mentioned multiple times already. I'm comparing native born students, so that's my positive control, and then my experimental group will be the refugee students. It's strictly scientifically speaking, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing two data points, sort of. First, I'm going to be measuring them with an online diagnostic test, which has laid out by grade levels, so you can compare your score or the student score directly with a grade level. And then based on those scores, I'm going to be comparing them to students of similar age levels and of similar skill levels, because there's obviously going to be a huge disparity. And so I want to cover both aspects, both age and skill, and see how those growth rates compare. Additionally, since I'm using Gideon's resources, I'm able to use their books and their curriculum. They too have a way to monitor how students are performing over time. And so using that information, I can further and I can support my conclusions that I find from the online diagnostic test, or I can highlight differences. For example, I won't get into the details, but there are some differences between them, which I might mention in another episode. The biggest challenge I found so far is coordinating between the refugee organization and Gideon Ma'aruf. Ma'aruf is a refugee organization, and Gideon, the place where I work at, because more than just as a research project, I want to continue providing a foundation for Ma'aruf to continue working with refugee students. And so I've been coordinating how to get the organization to pay for the books, pay for the materials, pay for the tests, in order to help the students. A lot of my research is secondary to helping the students. I love my research topic and I love being able to do my research, but more than research, I'm trying to help these students, and I'm trying to help them learn, and I'm trying to put a curriculum in place and a structure in place so that these students are able to learn and they're able to grow, because previously there's a lot of disorganization in the refugee teaching. The organization as a whole is very organized, but because this specific branch was being run by high schoolers, it was somewhat disorganized. There was not much growth happening, and so by putting the structure in place, by putting the curriculum, by giving them the curriculum I have from Gideon, they're able to move at a more regular pace. They're able to grow. They're able to have education or they have resources targeted at their specific needs. And that's something that I'm most proud of accomplishing. More than just the research, it's the impact that I'm able to have on these refugee students. Looking into the future, what I want to do in my original research is sorry. Looking forward into my original research, what I want to do most is to continue testing the students, measuring their abilities, and find those data points, find those trends, find those statistics that I find that compare the native born and the refugee students, and see how much this scheduled tutoring is helping them and how much the rate of growth between the students is occurring. And more than that, I just want to see how much these refugee students grow using the new curriculum and using the resources that I've been able to provide them. And that wraps up today's episode. It was a pretty long one, but there's a lot to talk about. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to catch you in another one.